On this episode of the show, I have with me Zach Wills. He is Director of Engineering at Luxury Presence, and we're going to be talking about vibe coding. And, well, Zach's got a bit of experience in there. We'll talk a little bit about Greenfield versus Brownfield and what are the differences, what are the similarities, and he's built a framework that we're going to dive into. It's an 8-rule framework that he is applying, and his learnings in there as well. We'll ask him about that. And if you haven't started or you have started and are not sure where things should be heading, how to tell if you're heading down the right direction, all of these things Zach will give us some viewpoints on. But thanks for joining the show. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat.
Absolutely. All right, before we dive in, what do you guys do at Luxury Presence?
Yeah, so at Luxury Presence, or LP, I affectionately call it, we build technology for real estate professionals. And so a lot of our customers are realtors, experienced realtors that are generally servicing like the top 10% or the higher ends of the market. They're looking for like luxury brands, that sort of thing, representing themselves kind of in a luxury way. And we started building websites for them when the company started 6-7 years ago. And it's grown really from being just a bit of a website platform to really being a full suite of marketing products. Like we just launched 6 marketing specialists, we've called them, the AI specialists. That was a great initiative, which was a lot of fun and kind of spawned a lot of my like internal playing with and coming up with some of these frameworks, things like that. Just launching AI in the product and really expanding it to do a lot more than just websites. So that's it in a nutshell.
There we go. Love it. All right. This episode, we're going to be talking about vibe coding. I know it's being talked about a lot of ongoings, lots of opinions, lots of thoughts. I guess if you could, I know, and we'll dive into it because the audience already knows about vibe coding. So let's dive into the deep end. So you've been using it, and to maybe set the context, if you could give us just a little idea of what kind of projects you've applied vibe coding to, whether they've been Greenfield or Brownfield. Just a little highlight would be a great place to start.
I've used it all over, up and down. I think most of the projects have been Greenfield because I've been vibe coding for a while since before it kind of had the name. I remember when Cursor first came out, this was like, or at least when I first started using Cursor like 2-ish years ago or something. It might have even been a little longer than that. There was like some sort of project at work that I worked at a different place at the time. And, I just had a hunch, like like something that I wanted to build. I knew that it was like off the critical path. I knew that, it was potentially something that could like shape our product. It was in an early stage startup. And so I just vibe coded that. Like, and I knew I didn't want to spend the time doing it, and Cursor was kind of new. And, at that time, I wasn't quite doing like voice to text vibe coding. It was more just, using prompting, et cetera. But I remember for me, that was like probably my aha moment with it, was like realizing I could build this thing that was actually driving some value internally. And I did it, in the span of a few hours. I built something that I know prior would have taken me, multiple days, if not longer. And then since then, I've had the opportunity to do it on a lot of new Greenfield projects, a lot of Brownfield projects. And so, yeah, at this point, kind of all up and down the spectrum.
Absolutely. I guess, you've been using it for a while, and I think that's great to kind of hear. When you were viewing Greenfield and Brownfield projects, you mentioned you're seeing it a lot in Greenfield. What are some of the Brownfield opportunities that you've used vibe coding?
Yeah. So most recently, we have a code base that we have a few different code bases. We have like a service oriented architecture at LP. And that involves dozens of microservices. Some are larger than others. But I actually had the opportunity to try, after I did some Greenfield work here, and I kind of I went to the team and I was like, listen, I think that there's a new way of working that's coming. And I chatted with them, and we were like, that's great. We see that there's a ton of opportunity in Greenfield. Can it work in our existing Brownfield system? Can it work in a really complicated and, just messy system that's been around for 5-6 years? This one in particular has tens of thousands of commits in it. It's got contributions from hundreds of developers over the years. And so it was definitely like a full on existing system, and it was one of our core systems. And so I actually got to play around with building inside of that system. I took a pretty big refactor slash, it was a little bit of a refactor of the existing audit log system, as well as incorporating some new technology, new to this area of the code base. Specifically, we're using Kafka to help with the audit log system. We were using Debezium and a couple tools like that we've used elsewhere, and kind of bringing that into this area of the system that doesn't currently have a lot of that. And I used that as like a real world project, and I knocked it out in kind of record time, at least for me. Like the way that what would have taken me if I wasn't using this approach certainly would have taken me 3 times as long, if not more. And throughout that process, it was also good because it was validated, and I was working closely with our chief architect and working closely with some of the other more senior engineers to like double check, hey, is the quality up to snuff with what we want it to be? Does this match? Because I wasn't personally writing any of the code. I was working with Claude Code. I was certainly accountable for the code, and I was helping give it direction and making sure it was making the right choices. But ultimately, I wanted other people's stamps of approval and like confirm, does this look like it was AI generated slop, like people generally say and think of when they think of this AI stuff? Or does it look and feel like, what you'd see from a senior engineer or something like that? And we found out over the course of that 2 weeks that I worked on this, it very much passed that check. The code that was produced felt and looked like a senior engineer wrote it. Followed our conventions, didn't introduce crazy weird stuff in this existing system, like deeply understood how it should look, how it should run, used existing packages, used patterns in the code base, all of the things you'd expect of, somebody who's building this system out. And so that was really eye-opening. It was a great experience.
Interesting. I guess as you've been a part of vibe coding in different ways for a while now, and you've done some Greenfield and Brownfield. I guess some of the things that you might have seen, right? I guess if you are deploying to production code, and obviously your team had questions, and there are some questions probably in other teams right now of, maintenance and monitoring and all those things, documentation. How have you seen, or how do you compare when you guys would typically hand produce the code that you're sending to production versus something that is being assisted, AI assisted, and ending up in the same place? What are some of the things that you've seen that you need to take account for?
So specifically the question around kind of the differences between when you were hand rolling, like the kind of code that would be produced and maybe what's getting produced by some of these AI systems.
Yeah, some of the stuff. I mean, you obviously, you're observing, an employee, quote unquote, help you write this code versus a teammate, versus you actually physically doing it with your teammates. But what are some considerations that you've noticed that you have to pay attention to?
I think the biggest thing is when you're manually writing the code, you have a very deep understanding of what's happening because you're manually, you're handwriting it. And it's funny to say manually because I think still for a lot of the industry, even though vibe coding's now been a thing for a while, and there is a loud kind of echo chamber of people who are starting to adopt AI, and it feels natural to think like, it feels almost unnatural to think that I'm going to write manually. But for a lot of the industry, they're still writing a lot of their code by hand. That's what we're used to, and that's what we're trained on. And so that level of understanding, is definitely different. Like when you're working with an AI, the way that I was, whether it's Claude Code or something else, like you have to detach yourself a little bit from, not all the way, but a little bit from the code that's being written and how it's being written. I think you should still do code review, and you should still look at it, and you should still understand what's happening. But to, let's say, watch every single line get changed and review and approve every single change is, it's just getting in the way of what could be a much more efficient process. Like I think giving a lot of control to the agentic coder and then reviewing it when it says the job is done, or reviewing it when it gets to a good checkpoint is generally the right thing. And if you've done it right and you've prompted it correctly and you've set it up with the right rules, then you should find that when you go and do that code review, it's no different than being an engineering manager doing code review for your team, right? Like you're not behind your engineer's back, watching them write code, telling them exactly when they wrote that class that it wasn't a good class or whatever. You're looking at the outcomes and you're reviewing the outcomes, and they're coming back to you day after day with an update or new PR. It's that same experience, which for me, as somebody who's been an eng leader for a long time now is very natural. But for new engineers is a little bit of a shift, or people who haven't been engineering leaders or managers, et cetera. That's different because now they have to kind of step into that managerial role, and that's a different skill set.
And I actually think that's a great overview. You mentioned that it's very similar to having, if you're an engineering leader, having some part of your team produce this code. You have that kind of separation, that distance from the code, anyways. I guess the people that are in your team now, the ones that are actually, doing less, spending less time on the keys, right? They're actually doing less time putting out the code. They also seemingly are moving into quote unquote managerial roles. Is that what we're seeing? Is that what you're seeing?
Yeah, 100%. I think that's what the industry is going to see over the next however long. I don't even want to try to guess how long it's going to take for the industry because it could be quick. It could also be slow because some of these tools, some companies are just getting approvals to use like GitHub Copilot and let alone Cursor or Windsurf or Claude Code or things like that. So, but yes, for the people who are kind of using these approaches in the ways that I was working during the Brownfield project and all the Greenfield work, even ICs are seeing that mindset shift. And it's a big aha moment for them. I've found as I've been training people and kind of showing people the different ways of working, something clicks when they realize that they're not personally, it's like a detachment or something. Like they're not personally driving the code as much. They're driving the outcomes more. They're letting the AI do more. And as a result, they're getting a lot more done because they can manage multiple AIs at once versus just doing single threaded work.
So I guess in terms of, a lot of people are talking about there's some stage of using an AI assisted tool to generate code, right? We're seeing it all over the place. We're also hearing, quote unquote, how quick and easy it is, right? And from some people's point of views, but obviously production code is slightly different. There's got to be maybe some gotchas that if you're just getting into it that you haven't observed, you haven't seen. I guess you've been doing it for a little bit of time. You're getting stuff to production. What are some of those gotchas that you need to pay attention to if you're just dabbling in it at this point?
I think some of the gotchas are probably one is I think it's really easy. It's easy to get too hyped on either side of it. It's easy to get really excited and say, wow, I had an amazing session, my first 2 or 3 hours, like vibe coding in a brownfield system or whatever, or maybe vibe coding in a greenfield. And then you're like, why isn't my entire team that's working in a brownfield system moving this fast? Like that's one problem. That's not quite the right mindset. And then it's also similar to try to do like your generic vibe coding that worked in greenfield, apply the exact same thing to brownfield, see it not work, and then turn around and say, well, this doesn't work. Like it's not going to, it doesn't work in my practice. It doesn't work in brownfield. Like both mindsets are wrong. I think that you've got to be one open-minded to the potential. Like I think the better question is if it doesn't work when you do try whatever your approach is, whatever your version of vibe coding is, I think asking yourself, why isn't this working for me when it is working for so many other people is a better question. And it's going to get you to better answers that ultimately like increase your velocity and increase your delivery and efficiencies more. And so, and the same mindset for on the greenfield side. Like if your team's not adopting it in the brownfield world, but they are in greenfield, I think the question could be, are there barriers or things that are making it trickier for them to adopt it? Whether it's the way our systems are built, the way that they're deployed, things like that. Like when you do greenfield, you can start from a very simple, straightforward thing that can load entirely into the context of whatever the agent that you're using. Brownfield, you can't just load the entire system realistically into it. And so you've got to get more creative at making sure that it has the right information it needs at the right time. You might need to give it access to certain databases or data structures, or there's like things that you almost through trial and error figure out work for your system. And they're not going to be the same exact answers for every system. There's definitely like patterns and frameworks that like I talk about in some of my blog posts and that I've shared. And those definitely are good starting points. But ultimately what works for my system or our system at Luxury Presence or your system at small startup is going to be different than what works at like giant megacorps, right? And but I think all of them can and should be very open to changing the way that they work to take advantage of the tech that we have now and the products that exist.
Absolutely. I actually want to dive into the your one of your blog posts about the 8 rules you've learned. Before I do, two
Sure.
quick questions. One, a developer happiness, right? Not productivity, not developer experience, but happiness. When you're a developer, you've written code for a long portions of your life. It's part of your life. Are you seeing developers happy in general, not to have to be as involved in each keystroke?
What's funny, I've run into this for sure because we as I've worked with more engineers here at LP and have shown them these different ways, I have gotten people say like, "Wow, this is incredible," but I'm also a little sad because like my role's changing a little bit, right? Like I almost think of like, I don't know if you know any woodworkers or people who are like, they just enjoy whatever it is, making chairs or making like kayaks or whatever that they do. And I think like there actually will be some people in the field that are like that. Like they love the art of actually writing everything by hand, and they take appreciation for it. And I think that will be some subset of people. I think what I found in the vast majority, especially people that I tend to work with and I tend to connect very well with, if you're oriented around driving business outcomes and business value, whether that's as an engineer or a product person or whatever, then you look at this, and as soon as you see what's possible, your mind expands in ways you can't imagine, because now you realize that you can drive so much more value than you could yesterday before you realize this new way of working. And for me, I actually am of the mindset that if AI can do this thing that I was doing previously, then I absolutely never want to do that thing again unless I'm doing it like for fun. Like if AI can write the code, then let it write the code. If it can write the email, let it write the email. If it can edit my blog posts, whatever it is, like the most valuable thing that I can do is going to be the thing that only I, as a human, uniquely can do. And the reality is that AI can do significantly more than people generally give it credit for, and then they're willing even to try. And so that's in and of itself is a limiting factor for people's like what you get out of it. Um, but maybe long-winded, but generally that's that's where I went with it.
No, I like that, and I guess Well, actually, let's dive in. I want to make sure we have enough time
Sure.
to get to that. So, and we'll link to the blog post. But obviously, in this case, you've spent some time with it, and you have written 8 rules. Maybe before we dive into each rule, just give us an overview of what those 8 rules are and what your thoughts are since you wrote that article.
Yeah, and I've got it pulled up here on the side because it feels like an eternity. I actually feel like since I adopted this way of working, it feels like every day it's almost like dog years. Like every day is 7 days, because you just get so much more done and things move so much faster. But looking at it, I do generally still agree with the rules. I think at a high level, they really they orient around, they're not like explicit, do this, not that. It's more so mindset shifts, and they're all related to like mindset shifts and taking advantage of this new technology and understanding the limits of it. So I don't know if you want me to go kind of one by one and give it my narrative attached to it, but I think some of the key ones that I'd highlight are like, I do think aligning on a plan and not just the goal is important. Like when you use these tools, even if you think about how a human works, if you're in the software process, you undoubtedly run into like tickets that don't quite have as much definition as other tickets. And so you give those to an engineer, and one of the first things you expect from them is either like a spike investigation, some sort of a quick look. Like they might not know exactly how much effort it's going to take, but they know they're going to spend a day like digging into solutions. And I think that planning process, as an example, is you want to replicate that with AI. Like a lot of what I found over my time working with it is thinking about the processes that I take as a human and figuring out, can I codify these? Can I automate these? And so that's just one example, like starting with a plan, measuring twice, cutting once, in a lot of cases is generally good software engineering advice, and it applies here. Um, I think the other one that was really eye opening is the trust the autonomous loop. I think that something that I found that was really incredible was, what I was doing is I was not manually writing the code. I was telling it, hey, add this feature to this page or whatever. And then it would say, all right, done. And then I'd go and I'd click around and I'd be like, oh, it didn't work. Just like you would, again, if you've been a manager before, you've led a team, like you've run into situations where you go to QA a developer's work and it doesn't work, or it does, whatever. That's a part of the process. Like you do some QA. A lot of product managers do this as well. Um, and I realized at one point through MCPs and things like that, I'm just clicking around a browser. I know that Playwright is an MCP that exists. Maybe Claude can just click around the browser itself and check itself before it tells me that it's done. And that workflow, as simple as it sounds like in hindsight, was an unlock at the time because it realized it opened my mind to not only can it click around the browser, well, what if it can connect to the database and it can actually query the data is or isn't in the database when I have a bug? What if it then can do the code and it can check in the browser, check in the database that it's all good before it tells me that I should take a look? What if it does code review on itself before it tells me to take a look? And so now when I'm getting the final PRs, they actually match. I codify some of what I look for in code review, and I make sure that even if it doesn't get it on first generation, which a lot of times it does, it gets it on those second or third passes as it does code review iteratively. And so that loop of finding out where I could get it to go farther on its own without me, absolutely, for me, game changing, and really opened my mind up to so many different ways that we can work with this tool. There's others too, but maybe I'll highlight those. And happy to dig into anything else if you'd like me to.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was going to ask you a question. I was listening to you go through all this, and my mind drifted to, well, they're getting a lot done. Surely, as we have heard from all the AI prognosticators, and we'll all be out of jobs. I'm assuming you guys are just bored. You're sitting there twiddling your thumbs, backlogs empty, just waiting to fire people. I mean, that's got to be what's happening, right?
Not quite. I think. I think what happens for me is, and for people like me, and not everyone's this way. Like, there are people out there who AI does this piece of it, and they are like, oh, cool. While the AI is iterating on this thing, I'm going to go watch TV or whatever. I'm going to go do something else. I'll come back when it's done. And I'm not necessarily saying that's a right or wrong method. It's just a different approach to these things. As someone who's ruthlessly oriented around driving business impact, driving value, particularly when I'm working, I want to maximize the value that I can drive and maximize the impact that I can have on the work that I'm doing. I take pride in the work that I do. And so when I find myself sitting there watching it, go through its loops, see it open Playwright, click around, I get angry almost. I'm like, well, I don't need to watch this. What can I do now to drive value? And so what that ended up with me doing, and this is, I think, what ended up making this post in particular get picked up by TLDR Tech and go big on Hacker News, et cetera, is I just found myself running multiple terminals and running multiple parallel Claudes because I was waiting for one. I've got a backlog. I'm just going to start another one. I've got a backlog. I'm going to start another one. And so what I'm getting at is the answer to me is not, well, we can do the output of 4 people with 1 person. Let's fire 3 people. The answer is we can do now with 4 people the amount of work that 16 people could do. That's an incredible advantage. Let's go and do that, right? It's more that side of it than it is reducing, because ultimately we can produce more value. We can capture more of the market. We can create a broader product suite. Pick your poison. But it's more about just getting more out of existing kind of resources and budget, et cetera, than it is about saving budget, in my mind, at least.
I agree with you. My mind kind of drifts when I hear this conversation. I start thinking about the entire SDLC, right? Mm-hmm. And when I say SDLC, I think some people, because the term's not used as much, whether you're running Scrum or a different version of how you're engineering lifecycle, this process has evolved by the notion that there are distinct roles of us doing a lot of stuff hands-on. Even the relationship with the stakeholders, the product owners, there's a notion that we need a certain amount of input from them. We need a certain amount of time to go do this. And all this is changing. I even have discussed the product owners, their roles potentially with other AI tools will shift this SDLC process, because all of a sudden they might not need an engineering team to get a prototype to just a 0.5 level so that they can see what would this look like. Do our requirements even make sense to us before we hand it to engineering? I'm kind of looking at this whole thing because you just described some people are going to go watch TV. Some people are going to think proactively. It's almost as though we're reducing the time everything takes. And with that time, we could solve other problems and we could also re-envision how we do this work, because it doesn't have to be this process. Whether you want to, I actually don't believe Scrum is as iterative. People want to talk about it. I'm a Scrum master. I'm going to get railed on that, but hey, just my opinion. I don't think it's as iterative, but with this coming out, it's going to blow up the notion of any type of loop or iteration or sprint that we've seen in the past. Like, how are you viewing this SDLC, and how are you seeing some of the changes already of how your teams are working with product owners?
Oh, for sure. I think the reality is that this. I don't know if it's a once in a lifetime kind of event that we're going through because there's probably been others. Um, but it's definitely a transformation. Like the way that software is built, how it's built, um, the kind of teams required, how big of a team, ratios of revenue per employee, or all of that stuff is going out the window because it's just all changing so fast, right? And even how it looks right now is going to be different than how it looks in 2 years when more and more companies and more tools. Think of all the general adoption tools like the Jiras of the world. That like Jira is almost the de facto, project management tool for most software teams, or Linear or tools like that. We don't even have a fraction of those kind of like commoditized versions of this new wave of enabling the new wave to work. Um, and even without that, the same way that the job of an engineer is changing to be from I'm an engineer, my job is to write code. Now I'm an engineer, my job is to take business constraints and turn it into software that, generally delivers an outcome. And now that I am able to manage multiple autonomous agents, now it's not really about my personal ability. It's about my ability to manage that team of autonomous agents, right? And to make sure that it produces good code, et cetera. The same way that job is changing, I believe the job of a product manager is going to change. Instead of being accountable for, one roadmap, maybe they become accountable for 5 roadmaps. Maybe instead of a good roadmap having like 3 well-spec'd projects that have been vetted or whatever, it's actually more about having dozens of well-spec'd projects that you've been able to like go and talk to customers and validate and create mock-ups and prototypes, et cetera, all before your engineers even get pulled into the loop. It's just, it could be any of the above and more or less. Like it just depends, but like every role is going to shift. So it's going to be fun.
It's
Yeah.
interesting because I when I post content about AI now, there is a negative undertone to the comments that I either receive on
Yeah.
DM or see in public. There's a negative component to this, and I think there's been a lot of fear around it. You just described a scenario where productivity is increasing, roles will be shifting. I'm sure if we were to, flash, actually, but forget forward. Let's actually go back in time. If we were to go back in time and see some of the impactful things that have happened in society, even the internet. We talked about buying books. People refused to buy books on Amazon. They were like, I'd still rather go touch and feel this book in their local bookstore. It was actually, I'm old enough to remember this debate that I like to touch and feel that book. I won't order it. And then the next thing is I need to touch the fabric. I will never order shoes. I have to try on shoes. I cannot simply, okay, I'll order shoes. And we saw this just process as adoption increase. I think what you described, that these roles shifting, I think as humans, we will find where to be productive. And there always has been people that will find the opportunity to go watch TV because that's how they were probably working anyways, right? They were probably not the conscientious employee. So I feel like, it gets a bad rap, but I feel like it reflects a person regardless of the tool.
I think I agree about it getting a bad rap. I think it's somewhat popular to hate on it and to be like, it's funny because I actually feel like the broad opinion is that it produces slop or whatever else, but it almost feels almost like that's the contrarian take because there is such a strong vocal people who push how transformative it is. And, I just think that if you have that mindset, like I'm somebody who has a growth mindset. I feel like there's always more that I can be learning. There's always more that I can be doing. I think I'm nowhere near where I want to be professionally, personally, skill set wise, right? Like I'm just always trying to learn and get better. And I think for me, it blows my mind that there like I couldn't even fathom looking at technology like this and like intentionally staying away from it because I see all of the transformative opportunities and I just want to be a part of that. I want to learn it. I want to take advantage of it. I want to figure out what's the next thing. I just can't even compute for me, the way that it does, I think, for some people. It could be that people see it as a threat to their job. They see it as, they laugh it away. I've seen like a popular meme is something like, oh, you have to tell the AI like well spec'd what you want to get good output. Our jobs are safe because we talk to humans and like people don't ever know what they want or whatever, things like that. And I just think you're missing the point if that's kind of your default reaction. I think you're just missing the forest for the trees to some extent.
Love it. Last question. I know you got to get back to it. What are you forecasting? So your team, you guys are using these tools. You guys are seeing production quality code. You've everything you said. Where do you guys go? Is it just more projects, more of the brownfield? I mean, what direction are you guys heading for the next year on this?
I mean, I can't even a year out. Who knows what it's going to look like? I think right now, we're feverishly expanding our understanding of what's possible. We're trying to push the limits of what's possible. We're learning how far we can push these tools and how much we can do with it, both by trying it in different, like I said, we have a lot of services, a lot of different areas of the code base, different levels of complexity. Can it apply in every area? I think it can. Have we validated that yet? Not necessarily. So like there's some of that, like making sure it applies everywhere, training teams on it. It's a different way of working. Can we train the organization to think this way? And then what are the implications, right? If engineering is moving however much faster we're going to move, is there enough backlog? Is there enough work to be done? Do we need to start figuring out how do we level up, the way that product works and the way that other parts of the organization work? I think these are the same problems that every organization that is having this mindset. And I know we're not the only ones, but I talked to some others, some other leaders who also see this in their orgs. It's the same problem across the board. Like everything's changing, moving faster. Some might be farther ahead on the product side, on the design side, on the engineering side, who knows, but it's all changing. And so really it's just, I think having that open mind, being willing and able to question everything, challenge everything, be willing to go outside of the box, create a new box, all of the above, and then just taking it as it comes.
Love it. Love it. All right. If somebody does want to reach out to you, you've covered a lot of ground for us. You've got some headway in getting stuff to production. Other people might be a little bit further behind. If somebody does have a question for you or just as a follow-up, what's a good way of touching base with you?
Yeah, I'm most active on LinkedIn. So getting in touch with me on my LinkedIn would be good. I've been writing a lot more actively on my blog, and I reply to pretty much every blog comment. So looking at a blog post, having a question, if you ask it there, I will certainly reply. Sending me a message on LinkedIn is a little harder because I do get a lot of messages on there, and a lot of times they're, recruiter spam or whatever it ends up being. So, but yeah, I'm generally pretty straightforward to get a hold of, and I'm happy to chat with anybody who has questions.
Love it. Zach, thanks for your time. Thanks for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right. That's it for the episode. We'll be back again. Different guest, different topic. Until then, two things. One, obviously, we dove into vibe coding. Zach has been delivering Greenfield and Brownfield projects. He talked to us a little bit about the differences, some of the things you got to watch out for. He walked us through his 8-rule framework, which you can find on his blog, and we'll link to that, and some learnings there. And we talked about how his team feels about vibe coding and some of the sentiments. And overall, a lot of value. Please share this with somebody else who's in engineering, who's interested in vibe coding, whose team might be somewhere in the middle and they need some direction. This is a great episode for them. Also, like, subscribe, comment. Let me know how the show's going for you. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.